Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this regularly scheduled meeting of the Springersbury Township Board of Supervisors. I'd like to start things off this evening with the pledge of the flag. If you please rise and join me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to take this opportunity to announce we did have an executive session following our last regular board meeting on April 25th, and that was to discuss legal matters. Nothing else scheduled at this point. With that, I'd like to turn the floor over to any communication from citizens. If you're here to make any comment, I'd ask that you step to the lectern and for the record state your name and address for the records. Anyone from the audience? If there's anyone on the Zoom call, if you could just use the raise hand feature. Hearing none, we'll move on to our engineering reports. First up, Buchard Horn.
Good evening, gentlemen. I have nothing to add to the report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Nothing from me, George. See y'all shaking heads. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Luciani.
Just one quick addition to my engineer's report at your place. I did want to provide some progress photos for some of the Arley and Greenlight Go projects along with the Davies Drive project. So if you're driving through those intersections, they're wrapping up completion, and I thought that as you know, we had a field meeting with the people at First Post, and we're trying to improve the design, and I thought the recommendation and the field meeting help us resolve some of the concerns that they had, and we have to do a couple of things out there to make it a little better for pedestrians, but I think it aesthetically looks pretty good. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
John, I have one, if you could. Excuse me, at the First Post intersection, there are two posts covered with plastic bags that I've not seen at any other intersection. What is the purpose of those?
Those, I believe, are the pedestrian push-button poles.
Oh, okay.
And then one of the things that's missing, we initially had a relatively steep ramp, and there was a little knee wall. And in our field meeting, and I'll give the manager credit, the manager, owner of the First Post was saying, I'm concerned people are going to come out if they trip over that curb. It's not a big fall, but they could get hurt. So, well, what's the solution? And he has a nice railing there, and we said, well, who manufactured it? And we're working on having a railing placed there to prevent somebody from falling over this little, it's a small cheek wall, but it's a legitimate hazard. It's not a hazard recognized by any PennDOT publications or anything like that, but it is with the high pedestrian traffic going in and out of that door. I thought that was a really good solution.
So normally they would be mounted on the mast arms on the.
Normally, you have to have them within so many feet of where you are, and even out at the other intersections, we designed it. It met the PennDOT requirements, and then the contractor and my inspector are telling me, geez, John, every truck tire is coming right by that PED button. Can't we move that back further? And so we were, the truck driving skills today, and I don't want to be, they're challenging because you see a lot of the intersections and there's tire marks up on the mast arm and things of that nature. So trying to find a safe place for these PED buttons is challenging. So.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Next up is our consent agenda. Are there any items any board members would like to have pulled for further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of the consent agenda items A through G as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Bids, proposals, contracts. First item, we have, we're looking for authorization for the chairman to execute a sewer payment agreement. Mark, I know we've discussed this in previous meetings. Has anything changed since we've discussed it previously?
Nothing changed. The solicitor and their attorney worked out the agreement. I reviewed the agreement and am in agreement with it. So I recommend approval.
Okay. Anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move
I
for
move-
authorization for the chairman to execute the sewer payment agreement for 2425 Pleasant View Drive, is that the one?
2454.
2454, sorry.
I'll second that amended motion.
Motion is second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Next up is the Camp Security Master Site Plan. And as I understand it, this has been fairly thoroughly vetted. Mark, do you want to elaborate on where we are at this point?
Yes, we submitted requests for proposals. We sent that out to 15-plus firms. We received four written proposals back by the deadline. We, as a group, and the group included Carol Tanzola from Friends of Camp Security and two members of our Park and Rec Board, myself and Brandy Shope, our Park and Rec Director. We reviewed all of the submitted proposals and graded those proposals on a point system that we came up with before we received the proposals. And then we met as a group. We did the scoring individually. We met as a group, reviewed all of those, came up with the two highest scoring firms, and then we interviewed those two firms. And based on the interviews, we came up with a recommendation, which was a 4-to-1 recommendation for SGA, the firm that we've recommended.
And this is not something we need to go with the lowest bidder on, correct?
It is not.
Wait, did you say SGA is who we're recommending?
Yes.
Any questions?
Well, Brandy's email is recommending YSM.
Right. She was the one, and the
Okay.
other four, so Kurt Blake, Andy Mears, myself, and Carol Tanzola recommended SGA.
All right. So can you give me a little insight as to what SGA's focus will be on the historical elements of the park? I noticed a lot of the background of a lot of the professionals is in landscape design, but I didn't see any like screaming historical resources or experience.
That's kind of where they shined.
Okay.
Compared to YSM, was their historical knowledge, their historical background, and other projects they've worked on. The other, in my opinion, the other area they truly shined in was the ability to engage with the public and get the public's input. They used more methods to get to the majority of the public instead of focused on a particular group.
And remind me again when they promised a deliverable that we'd be able to look at? What's the timeline?
1 second, I think it's like a 14-month process.
14 months.
Let me
Yeah,
just,
it looks like the timeline I'm looking at has 14 months on it.
But again, you say it was with the exception of Brandy, all were in favor of SGA,
Correct,
okay, including Carol.
including Carol.
Yeah, they had some interesting projects in their proposal that emphasized the historic aspects.
Anyone else? have
Mr.
any-
Chairman, I move to authorize award of the Camp Security Master Plan contract to SGA.
Second?
Motion and a second. Don, do you want to include the amount not to exceed in that motion?
Sure. I can't see what it is, but sure someone there can.
The amount not to exceed $89,993. Bob, you're okay with that amendment?
Yes, absolutely.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Communication from supervisors. Anyone have anything for this evening?
I have nothing, George.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I do have a report. I am sorry I could not be with you a couple weeks ago, but I am pleased to report that we did display Spring-Sperry Township at the PSATS conference. We had our flag there, and the third annual Parade of Flags, of which we've been a participant every year. I'm glad to say that we were able to demonstrate our flag on stage at the conference. One of the other things from the conference, as you all know, is that we did have a set of proposed resolutions where essentially the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors sets its lobbying agenda as we go forward. You all had the opportunity to review some of the resolutions. They all similarly passed according to what I expected how they would go and along with it, with the exception of one. There was some concern by certain townships that they don't have a tax collector or that their tax collector elected is not performing the duties. There really are mechanisms to replace that township tax collector. Even so, the resolution committee proposed a plan that we come up with a way to allow the townships to do something different in terms of that. That motion was defeated, or that resolution was defeated only because the majority of the convocation of all the supervisors and the delegates decided that there are already existing mechanisms for that. We did have the opportunity also to pass pretty much all the other resolutions. There was, again, the one on the tax collector was the most controversial. In terms of the other events, we did have the opportunity to host Senator Kristen Phillips Hill and Representative Wendy Fink at the legislative reception. I'm very pleased that they were able to come and attend and join as part of that activity. We also did get a legislative update, and there are a few bills in both the House and the Senate that PSATS brought to our attention that could potentially, if depending on how they come out of committee, could undermine the township's zoning capability relative to residential zoning. And there is a lot more details on some of these particular pieces of legislation, but suffice it to say that PSATS is watching some of these legislation in both chambers, and we'll want to keep an eye on that. I'll certainly call your attention to, and I'll send out an email of the various pieces of legislation. But there are efforts to pretty much undermine township zoning so that we can put any types of residential housing in any type of zone. So we'll be on the lookout for that. So happy to answer any questions about the conference.
Do I take from your comments then that some of the items we discussed a few meetings ago that we had some concerns about that they passed anyway?
They did for the most part. I can't think of one where we didn't. We were in a minority view, but I did want to take the opportunity, now that you remind me, to clarify the one matter on the CDLs. As you recall, the resolution, admittedly, not worded correctly, but the objective was that, so you have rural townships who cannot find qualified drivers that have a CDL to operate township equipment. But certain township equipment is of lesser size in terms of gross tonnage. What the objective of the resolution was to start dialogue with PennDOT to see, could we have a secondary type of license? So you wouldn't be the full CDL, but you could qualify for the smaller trucks in order to qualify, and they could get qualified licensed individuals, but not at the full CDL at the full commercial level. So that is down the road, but that was really the objective of that resolution. Admittedly, not worded correctly. I did vote against it. We discussed it again in the resolution committee. I did bring it up, try to get that clarity. And so we are going to continue to work with that and get some better wording, but that was the objective. Let's talk to PennDOT, see if we could get a second type of license.
Well, once again, Charles, I'd like to issue my thanks to you for being Spring Experie's representative to that. It's a very important function, and we're glad you were able to attend.
All right.
Thank you.
My joy to do so.
Okay, moving on, solicitors report,
No report for this meeting.
which leads us to the manager's report.
I have nothing to add to my written report.
Any questions for the manager on his report? Hearing none, we'll move on to ordinances and resolutions. We have a resolution here concerning sewage facilities planning module.
This resolution is, as I stated in my report, is a sewer planning module approval for a proposed development on Druck Valley Road. This typically doesn't come to the board because most of our developments are small in nature. This one's a larger one, plus it includes pump stations, so that's the trigger point to require a sewer planning module. So we reviewed, Danny Crable reviewed the planning module. Everything is fine with what they submitted. So this is just a formality for DEP. This, in no way are you approving any development. This is just a sewer planning module for that development.
Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I move for adoption of resolution number 2024-37, resolution for plan revision for a new land development sewer module as presented.
Second.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimous. Moving on to old business. Are there any items anyone on the board would like to discuss this evening? Anything under new business we need to discuss this evening? All right, very good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Meeting's adjourned.